Marm, I have to say that after we've implemented the open office layout here at the lair, there have been a lot of complaints from the minions saying that there's a general lack of privacy with how the sleeping arrangements are right next to the security cameras and the workstations and whatnot. I see. Did the minions filing the complaints follow the proper paperwork? Well, yes, they did, Marm. The new complaint station is quite popular. Good, well then, trace their identifications and either send them out on a scheme never to return or execute them. At once, Marm. Actually, here comes one of them now. Ah, perfect. You see, nothing is going to get in the way of my utopia, and this base is utopia. Research is all the way up to 100%. We have every single upgrade, every single item, and here it is, the best endgame base that I have been able to craft. It's gonna look a little bit different than the last time I did a video on making a super efficient base, my video about having a base with no walls. That was because I had a branching save game state to be able to pick up some of the loot items that I had missed out on that campaign. But this was the save that ultimately made it to the full level of research and having everything unlocked, so I wanted to hop over and carry this game all the way through to the end game. The base layout follows just some simple basic principles, so we're gonna go over it really quickly to see how I have set it up, and then we're gonna have another video where we launch Zelika all the way to the end of her campaign. She is actually the only genius that I have not seen her final cutscene for. Hello, Clara. Start us out on our tour. Entering here at the casino, nothing too special is going on. There's just a general variety of items, and then the breakdown of my deception minions is I have 20 valets working items, and then I have 8 of the advanced deception minion types. I find this is plenty to be able to deter agents and keep my items with a pretty good uptime. Once we make it through the back door here, we see we have a little bit of a security checkpoint. The zoning here is that I have it set to distract, and then if they make it through the back door, the agents are fair game for execution. But generally, the guards that I have stationed here and the security camera here is enough to be able to just deter agents and spit them right back out into the casino. Once we make it out here, we realize the first of the two principles that have governed my base construction is there's no walls, or very close to no walls. I have a few spaces for items that have to be built up against walls and a few spaces that can support security cameras, but otherwise it is completely open. The second principle is that I have tried to cluster all of the items for services and jobs of specific minion types together. So the door opens up into the armory, and all of this section of the base is for the guards. They have their table here to immediately respond to fights. They have their weapon selection, the items that will buff their stats. The prison here is designed to be in range of the sightline of the guards if anyone happens to break out. I also have a security camera able to cover all of the squares in the prison. They've got their dinner bar to be able to have snacks, and then they also can sleep right over here. This is a little bit farther away, but with the spacing of how this was set up, I didn't have a space that I wanted to put beds like directly inside the armory. And then spinning around here, we have their training room, or at least the most primary training room. And sliding up here, they have their next checkpoint of the Hall of Traps, one of the secret wonders of the world. If any agents or soldiers manage to make it through this door, then I have a series of security forces ready to take care of them, and this guard post for kind of the reserve security camera for some extra spotting power, and conveniently nearby, a bunch of incinerators to deal with the pileup of body bags. So the guards zone of my base takes up a fair amount of space. This is especially because their training equipment is usually pretty large, and I want to have a lot of trainers here because I cycle through guards faster than any of the other minion types. So making sure that I can keep my security forces topped off is pretty important to me, which is why they have so many training facilities. If we were to cut the other direction out of the back door, then we see the Deception Minion Zone. They have their refreshment bars, the other items to buff all of their stats, and their training room. I was debating whether or not I wanted to create a sort of valet staff lounge with a more central doorway out of the casino. I opted against it. I felt like this setup was only slightly less efficient for the valets to have to walk out here through the back door and then be able to make it to these items, but it was going to make my casino run a little bit smoother because it would not be attracting the other minion types to walk through the casino to get to the valet room, which they always seem to want to do, and then throw wrenches into how I wanted to be dealing with agents in the casino. This save was started before the Ingenious Item Pack DLC came out. Now that that pack is out, I think that the valet staff room is more viable because you can set up their designated beds out of the staff room, and then that is the main attraction of the other minion types, is to get to whatever luxury bedding that you had been giving your valets. So if you have the bedding locked off to only service valets, then that room is probably going to stay only deception minions, and their items there are not going to attract suspicion if agents do make it in there. So I think that the staff room with those new deception minion beds is probably what I would do if I had them available on this save. Skipping over some of the base here, we get to the Science Minion Zone, and I think this has to be my favorite portion of the base. Partly I built it a little bit away from the contours of the edge of the map, so I was able to have just very much a direct open plan, not dictated by any space constraints, and so it really clearly shows the zone that I have for training, the zone I have for the Science Minion jobs, being the lab, and then also the computer array here, and then the zone I have for services, and it's just really compact. I like this a lot. I've actually finished all of the research available on this save, so no more lab jobs for these guys. They just have to work intel and train new guys for schemes, but I do just really like kind of the visual of how compact I was able to be in getting services, training, and jobs all together for the Science Minions here. We have the lockers over here in the corner. Minions don't really need to go and check their belongings, right? So we just push them off to the side. And remember, you don't have to have all 300 minions supported via lockers, because the luxury beds are able to support an additional minion themselves. So you're probably going to have like 50 beds or so. So you don't have to go all in on the lockers. But these are pretty space efficient, and I mean, they're not too expensive by the late game. So you can build as many as you want. You're just going to hit that cap of 300 pretty quick. The inner sanctum and the med bay and stairways to the basement and upper floors are very centrally located here. I also have this lovely loot item, the Broken Time Machine, which will give a speed buff to whatever minions pass by. I try to keep it here in a fairly high traffic zone. And we have a construction depot, which I find to be incredibly important if you are doing something absolutely insane like me with my hallway of traps, so your guys can still run construction without having to run past all of those traps to get to the helipad, or potentially run past a squad of soldiers that is just going to gun them down. We have a bunch of other worker minion services here with their lunchroom, their beds, morale and education centers here, and then we get to the control room. And we also have this little curious room here that I have constructed. I want to talk a little bit about this. So I received some awesome comments from people talking about base design where they were using the medical bay decoration items that will increase minion stats if the minions are nearby. So you have one for every type of stat. And then I heard that what these guys were able to do is place down some chairs to get minions to kind of wait around the area where they would be topping up their stats, and that was kind of creating a great holding pattern for idle minions. The thing is, once you reach an end game build here where you have a control room this large, every single empty chair on these advanced radio repeaters is considered a low priority job for minions to work. So any minion that happens to find quote unquote idle time is just going to get pulled over here to work one of these jobs, put their butt into one of these chairs rather than one of these chairs, even though working the advanced radio repeater doesn't do anything for you. You're still going to have minions that want to work there. It's really a cosmetic thing, but it also drains their stats. So it's a little frustrating that you don't get any buff from having minions working these, but that's how it's set up, and that's why the minions at this point in the game are never going to use a break room like this. I've got more intel generating computer arrays, and then next to them I have stashed the decorations that will help slow the drain of smarts and morale. I put those next to every single one so that the minions can work these jobs as consistently as possible. Getting intel up quick is very important, especially in the late game. You can do a similar thing with the advanced computer arrays, building them with kind of spacing in between and then the items to buff up the minion stats. But again, you don't necessarily care if the minions are working these jobs longer or not because it doesn't make a difference to you. So that's why I just did these for show because I was doing that in some of my saves. But I feel like this is just more efficient in terms of space. You actually save a lot of space by cutting out that interior section. And you, again, do not care if the minions are working these jobs consistently or not. The upper floors are just power generation and vault, so techs need to come up here and be able to repair these items, but otherwise, no minions need to come up here. Because it takes so long for minions to climb the stairs, I'm actually probably going to put a tech break room here on the 3rd floor, just some meal options and some bedding probably, especially because the science minion type, the sushi buffet doesn't require an operator. It would be super efficient just to have up here in like a little corner so that the techs who are up here repairing my super valuable power generators don't have to walk all the way down to the 1st floor to be able to top up their stats. The basement right now is pretty underdeveloped. This is just an overflow guard training area. I was having a situation where so many fights were breaking out right around where my guards were training that their training was consistently being interrupted, and I wanted to have facilities where my minions could go to train to fill up my guard ranks without being broken off anytime a fight broke out. Okay, to wrap up this video, let's talk about my traps. Now, I am not going to say that this is the most efficient way to build your traps, not at all. I was just reaching a point where the max level agents were just absolutely destroying my security forces, and I had to do something to soften them up before they were getting into that fight. So because I am pretty rich here at the end of the game, I just kind of threw my wallet at the problem and put down as many of the high level traps that I could. I have done some refining, so let's talk about what I have found really works for traps. So traps are successful against the top level agents based on 2 principles. The first is catching agents by surprise with line of sight. So here, placing traps right around a corner where they're not able to see them, and as they step out, they're immediately in range, can often be pretty successful. The second piece is being able to layer trap effects onto the same tile. So here we see that we have the slippery floor. Agents will come and try and disable that so they won't fall over. And then we also have stacked on that same area a bunch of fans that are going to be trying to blow the agents. So the more traps that you have layering effects onto a single tile, the more likely you are to be able to be successful and not have those traps simply disabled. The level 9 agents are incredibly fast on that disable button of that sneaky little device they carry, so you really need to be able to overwhelm them with the number of traps that is trying to hit them on every single tile as they pass through your base. This section right here is actually the most successful combination of traps that I have been tinkering around with. So we have the poison darts here. I love this trap because it's able to set up and just affect this single row. Really effective for being able to layer effects. Then we have 2 of the death puppies here. So these areas are overlapped already by 2 effects if they're on the corners, and if they're on these center 2, it's overlapped by 3 effects already. We also have these adding on, though with the way the agents are going to progress, we are assuming that these are going to be disabled by the time the agents get to this point. But on top of all this, we have the people magnet that is also able to reach right to that critical position to try and pull them in straight into our Venus spy trap, or if they end up actually just stuck to the magnet, the trap does not trigger for some reason, then when they get dropped off, they're going to be hit by 2 more death puppies. Okay, we're going to watch a set of level 9 investigators try and navigate my lair and talk through what works and what doesn't in terms of the traps I've laid out. So right here out of the doors, this open corridor, these traps really aren't doing anything. I might as well sell them. They're never going to be able to catch anyone out. But already over here, we're starting to have layered trap effects on these individual tiles right here and starting to catch them out with the death puppies. Now, I wanted the people magnet pulling people through the disco chamber to keep them trapped there doing the disco, but it actually pulls them all the way off the trap. So they get damaged as they slide across. As you see, she took a tiny bit of damage, but they don't get stuck for the entire trap duration. So for this regard, it's actually better to throw in the shark traps or another Venus spy trap right here that as they get pulled through the trap will kind of nab them, whereas the disco floor, they're able to be pulled all the way off onto the magnet. Here they were able to disable the fan, but it was at the expense of being caught out by the death puppy, so either way they're getting hit by a trap. This little section is always pretty effective. It's just a lot of different layering of the Death Puppy effects. Death Puppy, I think, is the true MVP of the traps because it is so easy to layer its effects. As the agents walk up, they try and disable one, but they can be in range of another one at the exact same time. Right here, the dreaded paywall. Oh no, they're making you pay $5 for cut content DLC. Swipe that credit card, you make 50 bucks. The point here is that we try and bunch the agents back up together so that we can catch a few of them in this trap setup. Whereas before, when I didn't have the paywall, then the lead agent would get caught, but all the other ones would basically be able to avoid it because the traps had already they'd activated, and then they won't reactivate for a little bit of time afterwards. I really like this setup that I have here. I have a bunch of layering of fans trying to push them as soon as they round this corner, and then if these pinball bumpers do go off, it drops them through the disco into a shark tank. If they don't go off for some reason, they'll still end up in a shark tank. So I kind of like this kind of split that you have. Now, talking about agents and line of sight, agents treat line of sight really funny. They just want to explore everything in your lair, and so sending them into this large room often has them kind of start to spread out. I have seen cases where some of them will try and cut through this way, whereas others will go around. I mean, as you see, they're kind of doing it. They cut out here, and then these are running up this direction, and these are running up this direction. So as they split, they're also a lot more susceptible to traps, because in situations where multiple agents come into range of the traps altogether, they will then try and disable different traps. Whereas if only one of them is stepping into range, then hopefully, I mean, they're only able to disable a single trap at a time. So if another trap is able to reach out and get them, then they can take them down. This is a common hazard with so much of this area labeled as corridor. My security guards have nothing better to do but go on patrol out here, and then they end up being the targets of my traps. And it just gets a little bit annoying, but it's kind of the cost you have to pay for being able to soften up the agents. One way you can try and mitigate this is by having a consistent set of jobs for your security forces to do, so there's not so many of them that are just idle. Like if we were to look over here, Nicola Giblet is trying to acquire a weapon. I guess one of the other guards died out here, but this guy has no job, so he's just on quote-unquote patrol, and because this is such a large portion of a corridor and there's so many items so densely concentrated here, the AI thinks it's an important place to send the guards, whereas really, I would just rather have this all be empty for the agents to wander through. There we go, they've made it through most of the clever portions of my traps. Over here, I just kind of have a set of Venus spy traps, hoping that just with the sheer quality of traps to be able to catch a few of the agents out. As we see here, the agents have been softened up a little bit. Most of them actually came out of this looking okay. This guy's on death's door. I think we killed one of them a little bit earlier, and a lot of the other ones are sitting with only having been hit by a few traps, but it should still be enough that my security forces waiting outside the door will be able to deal with them pretty easily. Most of these I could just sell because they cause more friendly fire than damage to the agents, but they have been able to occasionally catch them out. And if you are dealing with lower level agents, don't worry if you don't have the highest level of traps available. Your lower level traps are going to be able to catch out those mid-tier agents, but once you hit the point where you're getting level 9 agents, you're really going to want to invest in some strong traps and some intelligent combinations of them to be able to soften them up before they reach your security forces. Also, with the patch of 1.4 and the new Ingenious Items DLC, you have a bunch of items that are going to improve the efficiency of your security forces. So this is not as important, or at least it will not have to be as extensive as I have. Another way that you could try and set this up to have a stronger setup for your lair is route this hallway into your cover operation, or extend the cover operation so that they connect in some way. You're still like, this is already going to have a very long pathway for minions to be able to get out to the helicopter, so might as well send it into the cover operation where you're going to be able to start distracting agents, right? That would probably be successful. I wanted to play around with the lethality of traps, so I'm doing this intentionally. It's probably a better decision just to run it into the cover operation. When you're trying to zone this area, I recommend just setting no zone at all. If you're doing this run that I have, you might say, well, hey, if I do distract, that can only help me, right? It'll have them lead the agents over into the cover operation where they are going to be distracted. And if your minion is successful, that's just a bonus, right? Well, it's not really, unfortunately, because when the agents, if they came via the helipad, if they then have their resolve completely depleted and they want to leave, they have to also leave by this same beach. So if they get over here and have their resolve completely depleted, they are then going to look to exit via this door. So in the case where I have, there was a while where I had this zoned for distraction, but then I was realizing that the agents that get caught over here basically never want to leave. Because they're gonna, or they will never be able to leave. Your minions will not let them because they're gonna lose their resolve. Then they're gonna try and walk in here. They're tagged for distraction. At this point, they have 0 skill, 0 resolve. They're a dumb agent. Your guy goes up and then leads them back into the cover operation. Rinse and repeat forever. As a caveat to that, you can also use that situation to your advantage. It is extremely cheesy, but the longer you have agents quote-unquote defeated, the longer until you receive another wave of agents. This wave, like if one of these soldiers was just waiting, well, the soldiers obviously won't work, but if a agent gets caught over here, you're never going to get another wave until that guy is quote-unquote defeated. So you can't try and cheese it, just trap them in here in the cover operation basically forever. In that case, I would actually say you want to sell any of these traps you're using to defend this area, and then they just keep leading him back into the casino. He tries to get out, move him back, and so on and so forth forever. And voila, your agent problems are completely fixed, which I find hilarious. I don't know if they're going to patch that. It seems kind of just integral to the way the agents work, and that they want to enter and leave by the same zone, and I don't think that many people are exploiting that right now. But if you're really in a pinch of agents just devastating your security forces, don't feel set up to do it, try and see if you can finagle that kind of situation where you have an agent stuck in the cover operation who wants to leave via the helipad, and make sure that nothing is going to hurt his health, and you can just basically keep him there forever. There we go. That is my final endgame base that is as efficient as I have ever been able to build one. I really wanted to kind of wrap up the previous video that I had done on building a base with no walls, which kind of ended in the mid-game, and wanted to show what it looks like once you have reached all of the possible upgrades and items available. I really like this kind of build, just taking out all the walls and then building clusters of rooms that will service your specific minion types. So you just build services, training, and jobs next to each other for your designated types, and then they can just kind of stay in this bubble and work really efficiently on the jobs that you are giving them. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, comment on any base building techniques that you have found to be super efficient, and subscribe if you want to see more videos from me. Thank you guys for watching, and have a good one.